Welcome back! Today in Dark Souls 3 we're going to finish up exploring the Undead settlement. It's taken us quite some time, and this mysterious message is still here, floating in the air with 9,999 ratings. But we're just about done with the place.
Fret not, my feet are here firmly planted, for I am a lord, and this is my throne. Listen, this might pique thine interest. Before I was a lord of Cinder, I was a student of transposition, the process of extracting and coalescing the essence of a soul. A forbidden art that once left a foul stain upon Corlin's honor. 'Tis an art that grants powers once thought unattainable. Most transposing kilns were lost with Corland, but this place is a crossing for all manner of cursed objects. If thou happenest upon a transposing kiln, bring it to me, quick. Listen, with the Now, do not be away over long.
Now, if you remember, we actually ran into one of those developer messages earlier about a transposing kiln lurking within the belly of the beast. It seems like we have more motivation to go find out what that is now. Also, we picked up the grave key. It's the key to the barred door leading to the caverns under the sewers in the settlement, which is where we're heading. We have plenty of bonfires to choose from, but this one is the closest, more or less. An interesting thing to note is that it is not strictly necessary to buy that key to reach this area. If you have enough vigor and general health, then you can actually just drop down. It takes quite a lot, and most characters at this point in the game will not have that many hit points. So the key is a much more economical and reasonable solution for actually everyone, but if you want to be stubborn, it's there. Also, I got turned around here. I forgot exactly where the shortcut to the sewers was, but it's actually right by the bonfire. Alright, that guy's using an endgame weapon. I'm not going to summon him for a friendly duel. Black Knight Great Axe in the Undead settlement. Who does he think he's fooling? Coming down from this direction is a little bit awkward since the rats are right there. You're a little bit vulnerable when you get off the ladder. Fortunately, rats are not particularly dangerous, so it's not a big deal. We're finally here in unexplored territory, and we're going to equip the mace. There's a reason for this that will become evident shortly. This is the first major feature of this new area. This is the statue of Velka. Velka, you might remember from earlier games, is the goddess of sin. And her acolytes act as pardoners. You talk to them and pay them some souls to make people not mad at you anymore for hitting them in the face. The statue serves the same purpose, with the added bonus of the fact that you can't accidentally kill it either. You can hit it as much as you want with your weapons and it will still pardon you. It also mentions something about dissolution, but for now that doesn't really apply. This is why we wanted the mace. There's skeletons in this area, and skeletons are fairly vulnerable to blunt damage. Or perhaps it's more accurate to say they are quite resistant to slashing and piercing damage. They seem to have some odd growth, too. I guess they've been down here a while. skeletons are fairly unremarkable, but if they enter a defensive stance, they can parry you. And they are also completely immune to bleeding because they don't have, blood. If you hit them with a strong enough attack from a blunt weapon, or just like a super heavy greatsword or something, then they'll sometimes just fall to the ground and collapse, and they have to put themselves back together again. It can buy you some time. It can be kind of annoying, though, since they are slightly invulnerable when they do that. They have some iframes to deal with. We pop out in that ravine that we could see from up above by Siegmeyer's tower, and where the grouchy knight was sitting. Crystal lizards are quite resistant to magic, by the way. It's not really a problem, but it's something to be aware of. Depending on how the RNG is treating you, it can also lead you right into a trap. We saw this grandson earlier just off to the side doing his thing, and his purpose is to do a plunging attack on you from great height. Now, normally, this would just kill most enemies. The fall is fairly severe. However, all the enemies in this area are programmed to be able to survive this, regardless of their actual health. They will take some damage, but under normal circumstances, they would take quite a bit more than what they do. That can be a very nasty ambush if you're not expecting it, because you really wouldn't expect somebody to be able to survive that kind of drop. There's an important treasure up there, and we need to equip a crossbow to get it, because we don't have any ranged spells on us, which we could use if we wanted, but I find that bows are the easiest way. You don't actually have to hit the string with an arrow or a bolt. You can hit the body to make it fall, but I like to show off. We're out of bone country, so I'm going to switch back to the hand axe and put on our new shield. This is a blessed shield. What blessed shields do is that they grant you steady but slow HP regeneration. Infusing a shield with blessing will make it a lot worse at actually being a shield, but in response, it's still a fairly useful tool that gives you some sustainability in the field. Honestly, I end up rolling with the blessed red and white shield quite a bit on most of my characters, just because it's light and you can parry with it. Light enough that you can usually just switch to another shield if you actually need to block things. I'm having a bit of trouble with this huge rat pack, but eventually I managed to get my footing enough that I can take them down. The Saint's Talisman is a sort of side grade to the talisman that we bought from the Shrine Maiden. It scales better with Faith, and it has better spell buff, but it has less base power, and its unfaltering prayer weapon skill is a little bit weaker. Though we might have just found the owner.
Who is there? Is someone there? Anyone? Oh, please, whoever you are, touch me. The dark surrounds me, nibbles at my flesh. Little creatures, they never stop biting. So please, hold out your hand and touch me. Ah, yes, there you are. So close, indeed. Then I am not entirely alone just yet. Praise the merciful gods above.
Got a bit of a case of the hover hands going here, but let's not worry about it.
Oh, forgive me. I am Irina of Carim. I came to this land so that I might be a firekeeper. Your touch has freed me from the darkness. You are a champion, then? I am weak and unfit to tend the flames. But if it would not trouble you, Might I enter into your service instead? Oh, thank you, sweet champion. I shall take my vows. I, Irina of Carim, solemnly swear to serve you.
And away she goes. Irina is a helpful NPC that will teach us miracles when we get back to her in Firelink.
You've gone and rescued her, have you? How very quaint. Pitying creatures that are beyond help. Yeah. Very well. I'm sick of looking after her at any rate. I am Egon, a knight of Carim. I am allied to you for as long as you assure the girl's safety. And only for that long. What's the matter? My terms are very simple. I am allied to you for as long as you assure the girl's safety. And only for that long.
Uh-huh. Well, at least we know his name now. What a jackass. Anyway, let's go check up on Siegward. I think most will agree that he's a great deal friendlier than Egon. As for his ultimatum, we will simply have to do our best to keep Irina out of harm's way. Ah, here he is.
Ah, oh, don't disappear like that. You had me downright worried. But thanks to you, an epiphany has struck me square in the head. I've unraveled the riddle of this inscrutable lift. On some days I begin to doubt myself. I went up the tower, so I thought, then somehow ended up here. I'm not exactly sure what happened. Anyhow, do you see that? That humongous beast? I'm no coward and I've a steady hand, but that thing makes my skin crawl. How now? Think twice before you go down that road. I could try talking some sense into him. No, I think not. He's far too overheated. I've got to use my head and think.
Well, it looks like Siegmeyer is... I knew that was going to happen. Siegward, not Siegmeyer, is in a bit of a pickle. The way is blocked by a fire demon.
No! You should have waited! Well, it's too late now. I, Siegward of the Knights of Catarina, fight by your side! Ah!
Let's give him a hand. This fire demon would be very dangerous, but the thing about Siegward is that he uses his Y-hander, and his Y-hander does hella poise damage. The demon barely got a chance to do anything.
That was quite a performance. But you mustn't get in over your head. We unkindled must put our duties first. But, for the moment, we've a toast to make. To your valor, my sword, and our victory together. Long may the sun shine.
I'll drink to that.
I'm going to have myself a little nap. The only thing to do, really, after a nice toast.
And he is out like a light. A skilled warrior, but an even more skilled sleeper. For that little interlude, we get the Siegward and 2 gestures. The Siegward is a consumable item that will restore your HP and I believe improve stamina recovery for a certain time. I've never actually used it. I tend to keep them in reserve. Though there is another thing that you can do with it, which is also quite worthwhile. Either way, it's an appreciated and valuable gift. It's either restores stamina faster or reduces damage taken. I can't quite remember. And wouldn't you know it, this is the one time I forget to look at it in the inventory screen. I'll put an annotation in or something with the actual effect. This entire area is actually completely optional, but there are some very useful items here. Believe it or not, the somewhat grisly pale tongue is one of them. We can also get the northern set of armor, which is what the warrior starting class begins the game with. It's a sort of medium to heavy armor that's quite useful and offers good protection, especially against frostbite, which is not especially something that comes up very often, but it's there. Though, at this point you would have to have beaten Vort. So I guess you could just put it on to fight the Outrider Knight if you were really having trouble. Though the frostbite isn't really what makes that encounter difficult. Either way, this farmhouse is just crawling with these caged hollows, and unfortunately, they're just out of Great Combustion's reach. I have no choice but to simply fall for the trap. It's not the end of the world. They're not particularly difficult enemies, though they have a habit of throwing things at you. The less said about that, the better. All for an alluring skull. I think we've been had again. As you can see, actually using this blessed shield to block doesn't do an awful lot. It still makes the dogs bounce off, so it's useful in that regard, but actually using this as a serious defensive option is out of the question. It seems that the skeletons are not the only ones with odd growths growing out of them. This is another trap. It's a bit more serious than the last one because there's more caged hollows to deal with. But again, they're just not especially threatening enemies to begin with. So even a whole bunch of them isn't that big of a problem. Great Combustion deals with them very quickly. Disgusting. Also disturbingly effective. For our trouble, we get human pine resin, which is only marginally less grim than it sounds. It's a sort of embalming substance that has the after effect of imbuing a weapon with dark damage. And to make matters worse, we have 2 evangelists in tight quarters. decide to engage some classic tactics and equip my fire bombs, which I forgot I had until this moment, to pull them one at a time. However, I made a bit of a mistake, because fire bombs do splash damage. I should have used a throwing knife. It works out in the end, but they're both aggroed now. Fortunately, it seems that we have one upstairs just throwing gnawing at us, and the other one is actually approaching. Right there, that was actually a whiffed backstab. It's sort of an annoying feature in this game that you lock yourself into this animation. It's sort of like how in Dark Souls 2 you did that sort of weird neck scruff attack, and if that connected you got to do a backstab. In this one it's more of like a slow, deliberate connecting attack from behind that enemies can actually move out of, so you can find yourself in bad situations. And sometimes even miss enemies that are standing almost completely still if the angle is bad. One down, one to go. Somewhat irritatingly, probably due to this attack, evangelists are fairly resistant to fire compared to the other things in this area. Great Combustion is still quite strong, but not as strong as we might like it to be. Still, I'm out of flasks. And even at such low health, these guys still pose a threat, so I need to be careful. Gnawing actually moves so slowly that it can be difficult to see when exactly the opportunity is to get through it. I would recommend just going around rather than rolling through it. The iframes don't necessarily last that long. So that fight took a bit more out of me than I was thinking it would, which puts me in a bit of a bad position. Fortunately, we do have the Blessed Shield to fall back on, which will, slowly but surely, refill our health. Flynn's Ring was an old favorite in Dark Souls 2, which increased your attack rating depending on whether or not you were heavily encumbered or not. In this game, the effect is much diminished. Most other rings are more useful. The attack rating boost is just very small in this game for whatever reason. Still, at this early stage, it's not the worst thing we could equip, especially since we're using mostly light armor. Here I'm just sort of in mortal fear of this fall killing me. I briefly considered using the Siegward to heal myself up here, but you don't get another one for quite a while, and like I said, there is another use for it, so I decide, you know, you only live once. Which in this game is actually categorically untrue. You live many times. You die many times. I was also considering briefly turning back and just like using a homeward bone and coming back with more health, but it would be quite the trek, and there are some very valuable items at the bottom of this tower. If you try to drink an Estus when you're out, you just get this sad little animation where you try and shake some more out, but nothing comes. We are low enough that it triggered our blue tearstone ring, so that's a good indication that we need to wait before we try another fall. I won't actually make you sit and watch that, so a quick snip to show how completely gradual and marginal the HP regen is, and yet still life-saving. At any rate, our reward for patience is the Chloranthy Ring. Another favorite from Dark Souls 2 that is still, as far as I know, pretty powerful. It boosts stamina regen. We also get the Mira set, which our old friend Lucatiel of Mira used to wear. It's good light armor with strong protection for its weight. It's also very dashing, which is, of course, its most salient aspect. No hat, though. We'll have to fix that at some point. Just a quick check for items to make sure. I'll look down there to see that no, we really don't want to go in this state, and a homeward bone out. A bit dicier than I had intended, but it all worked out for the best. Mostly. Now there remains only one more thing to do here in the settlement, and that is to investigate reports of a transposing kiln. We're going to need to switch bonfires through this. I also want to switch out my spells a little bit. Instead of magic weapon, I want great combustion and a ranged option. And foolishly, I choose fire surge instead of fireball. Fire surge is a bad spell that does very little damage. Fireball is a good spell that does appreciable damage. It also has more range. I end up regretting this decision later. But nobody can prove it because I cut it out. All that's left is to explore that open area that we passed by before. And just a quick dissolve here. You may notice a couple of changes in the loadout and lack of ember. Don't worry about it. Everything is fine. Nothing bad happened. This is the third boss of the game, the curse-rotted Greatwood. It's also one that I am uniquely kind of terrible at. I have yet to get a good fight of this thing on camera. Now, the curse-rotted Greatwood's main gimmick is that its barky hide is more or less impervious to most standard forms of attack. So we need to find an alternative way to do damage. And as the more astute of you have probably figured out, the weak points are those egg sacs, or whatever they are. Great combustion deals a whole lot of damage to them. The tree's attacks are fairly non-specific and not much to write home about. He just sort of swipes back and forth, then he does stomps. They're all very slow, but they have a lot of range due to his size and a reasonable amount of stopping power. In this phase of the fight, a bunch of worker hollows will continually reinforce the tree. However, that is to their detriment because the tree, as you can see, does a whole lot of damage to them. This benefits you an awful lot, not just because of free souls, but also because it can help refill your flasks. So if you sort of botch things like I did in the first parts of the fight, you can just hang back, buy a little time, wait for the tree to kill enough enemies to get some back, and then progress. There's also an interesting thing about this fight that I don't like a whole lot, in that some of his weak points don't actually become vulnerable until a certain thing happens. So I spend a little bit of time trying to aim for spots that aren't even really viable at the moment. In the first phase of the fight, I would recommend going for as many egg sacs as possible. But sometimes, you know, you have time pressures and you're recording a video and you really wish that the stupid thing would hurry up, so you have to take matters into your own hands. The roll into hollow trick still works here, so if you need to buy yourself a little space, you can do that. Once you pop the main cluster of egg sacs in his crotch area, this happens. The fight moves to the Pit of Hollows. Oddly enough, despite the name, no more worker hollows will reinforce during this phase, which means that whatever Estus Flask you go in with are going to have to last you. The other major change is that the tree sprouts a new hand. That hand, by the way, is vulnerable to attack, though. As was evidenced in my blind run, it's not necessarily a good idea to go for it. This is why you want a ranged attack. It's much easier to pop those ones on his back if you have Fireball or Magic Missile or something. Sorry, not Magic Missile. Soul Arrow. He's a great deal more dangerous in this phase, mostly because of that new hand. It moves quite a bit faster and it does a lot of damage. It's also a little bit erratic. You also have to get right up in his grill, which makes it difficult to see what that hand is actually going to do. And we just wrapped him on the knuckle for the last hit. That fight can go pretty poorly, and it can take a long time, especially if you don't know what you're doing. Or if you try to use Fire Spray. Just between you and me. But we managed to defeat it, and we get the transposing kiln. Bloodlith will be pleased, no doubt. Hodrick, who gave us the Moundmaker's Covenant and invaded us like a jerk, is nowhere to be found. Hopefully he made it out okay, or maybe he just died to having several tons of tree fall on him. Interesting looking thing. Doesn't look much like a kiln to me. Still, if it's useful, it's useful. Let's go back and give it to its rightful owner. Or, well, I suppose that's presumptuous. Let's go give it to the person who can actually use it.
Fret not, for I am. Oh, belike it is a transposing kiln in thy possession. Seen better days, but methinks it shall suffice. Now, bring to me a twisted soul. Transposition is the art of extracting and coalescing the essence of a soul. In transposing a twisted soul, its true power transferred to thee. Thy purpose is to seek lords and slay them. What's to fear in a little transposition now?
Nothing really, but we're out of time. So, we'll talk a little bit more about transposition in the next episode. It's quite a handy feature, but for now, we need a break. That tree was nasty.